Great job on our trivia, everybody. Thank you so much for playing. At this point, I am very excited to welcome our guest of the evening and get on with our awesome learning tonight. We're delighted tonight to welcome Dr. Michael Beug, an acclaimed mycologist, author, and educator. Mike earned his PhD in chemistry at the University of Washington and spent over 30 years teaching chemistry, environmental studies, mycology, and organic farming at the Evergreen State College. He's been studying and photographing mushrooms since the late 1960s, with his work featured in more than 80 books and articles. He's the author of Acclaimed Fungi of North... Did I pronounce that word right? I got it close enough. Great. Acclaimed Fungi of North America, a mushroom reference guide, and Mushrooms of Cascadia, an illustrated key of the fungi of the Pacific Northwest, now in its new second edition, which you can buy at the back of the room before you head home. He's served on numerous committees of the North American Mycological Association and is a past recipient of their award for contributions to amateur mycology. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Beug. I'll hand this to you. And
Thank you.
If you want the clicker, it's here, and I'm going to get your slides set up for you.
Okay. I guess it's getting quiet. You can hear okay in the back, because earlier when it was noisy, it was hard to hear back there. Of course, I'm deaf. That doesn't help a lot. Okay, let's figure out what I'm holding here. Okay. I've been photographing mushrooms in this area since 1968. And the photography in the book, the pictures go back all the way to the early 1970s. And so when I was shooting with the bellows, now I use my smartphone and don't carry a camera anymore. But it's a really exciting thing to do. And what I've created in the book, I want to talk about, is the only illustrated key, the only picture key that I know of written anywhere in the world to identify mushrooms. And so it's a very unique book. And I did that based on watching how people learn over the last 50 years and trying to get people beyond just picture matching and focusing on the critical features. Okay. Well, one of the easiest things to start with is chanterelles. And up in the top, in the lower right corner, Cantharellus roseocanis has been fruiting literally by the thousands in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest when people weren't out looking for it. And then a lot of them came up and molded, and now they're about done, surprisingly enough, unless you're out on the coast, because these things are associated with spruce. And so we have spruce above 3,500 feet, and we also have spruce in the coastal fog belt. And so, okay, boy, you have to really go up there. Okay, and then my favorite is the Cantharellus cascadensis, the big one on the left. It's actually very closely related to Cantharellus subalbidus, the white chanterelle. And the distinctive feature of it is actually when it's still underground and before it comes out, it's all white. And the top quickly turns yellow in the sun, but the underside stays white. And it's a very big mushroom. I mean, I once picked one in my own woods, and it took my wife and I 2 days to eat the one Cantharellus cascadensis. And they're very delicious and very interesting. And the Cantharellus formosus above is one of the most common ones. And all three of these, when I began, were all called Cantharellus cibarius, which is found in Europe and not here. But these are really easy because of the blunt ridges on the underside. And sometimes they tend to be forking. And the other feature, when you're identifying mushrooms, you don't just look at them, you smell them, you taste them, and you rip them apart, literally. And all the chanterelles tear apart kind of like string cheese or like a nicely cooked uh, chicken breast. You know, they have that stringy nature. And that's very unique to the chanterelles. And other mushrooms don't do that. And so these are really good mushrooms to get started with as your first mushroom. And Hydnum repandum is what we knew of this mushroom that's now Hydnum washingtonianum. These are chanterelles that have teeth underneath, but genetically they're incredibly closely related to a chanterelle. And they're very, very delicious. And I particularly like the little ones that have a depression in the center, and those are called sweet tooth. And some people even call these big ones sweet tooth. But once you've eaten both of them, the this one, and I found a nice bunch of these day before yesterday, and they're not sweet tooth. They're good. And then we have these other things that have teeth on the underside, but A, they don't tear apart like a chicken or string cheese. And B, you try and bite into them, it's kind of like biting into some shoe leather. And quite often, the flavor is this delightfully bitter or raw flour flavor. But you can't, I'm stunned at how often people say, is this a chanterelle, the one on the right? Uh, and I learned it as, well, it's now in its third name. Its current name is Hydnellum stereosarsanon. Now, if you are into fungal art, and like my friend Julie Beeler, who wrote the Mushroom Color Atlas, when we go out together, we're picking these things because she's going to be using them for color. So, but you're not going to be using them at the dinner table. And same with Sarcodon ramosus. It's still in Sarcodon, but that's just because somebody hasn't gotten around to moving it. It also is going to go to Hydnellum. And then we have this beautiful little, they call it the toothpick fungus, Arscalpium vulgare. Now, it turns out Arscalpium vulgare is European. Oh, I'm sorry, folks. So that's to remind me to take my meds, which I forgot to even bring with me. So it's going to be a moot point. Um, it's a cute little thing. It's about as big around as your thumbnail, and it has teeth, and they call it the toothpick fungus. The European species has the stem right in the center. Our species has the stem off to the side. And so we call it vulgare CA01 because it's found in California. That's where, but it's also found in Oregon and Washington, British Columbia, and on up into Alaska. And someday it'll have a brand new name. That's called a provisional name. And that's what we're busy doing. Now, if you really want to get me excited, then lion's mane, Hericium erinaceus. Now, you find this thing on oaks. And I remember when Steve Trudell wrote his Mushrooms of the Pacific Northwest, he thought they weren't in Washington or Oregon, and they aren't there. But let me tell you a little secret. Go up the gorge, go down the Willamette River Valley, and these things will start fruiting probably this year. It'll probably take till November. But if it stays mild, I can find the lion's mane as late as New Year's and still be in, and it'll hold up for a long time. Now, how do I distinguish a lion's mane from a bear's head? Lions have a long mane and bears have short hair. And so Hericium beatus, the bear's head, has short teeth. And it has branches with teeth, where the lion's mane is just a massive piece of meat. When I cook it, I literally slice it like a ham and sear both sides of it. Or if I'm really getting excited, I make imitation crab cakes with it. Now, the other reason for eating some of these mushrooms, and lion's mane is near the top of that list, is you're going to live on average 4 or 5 years longer if you're eating good edible mushrooms at least 3 days a week. You're going to cut your probability of getting Alzheimer's by about 55%. You're going to cut the possibility that you would wind up with Lou Gehrig's disease. And this is one of the best. It's a neuroregenerator. And Hericium beatus is almost as good a neuroregenerator. It doesn't make that good of crab cakes, but I like it even better for flavor. People ask me what my favorite mushroom is, and well, the real answer is it depends on what month. But the Hericium beatus is really wonderful. And for about 10 years after the eruption of Mount St. Helens, in that blowdown area, there was tens of thousands of bear's heads growing on all the down trees, just massive quantities. And I remember out of Packwood, when I was doing some research for the Forest Service with my class, we saw one of these bear's heads up in a tree, and it was about 40 feet up. So I had three students stand on each other's shoulders and then and hugging the tree so they didn't fall down, and then a stick. We knocked it down, and I had 20 students in the class. My teaching partner had the other half of the class over in Forks, and then we ate that one mushroom, 20 of us, for 3 days. And it was bigger than a bushel basket. Often they're the size of a soccer ball. That's sort of a typical size, but they can really get big. And I have my mushroom classifications. I have my 55-mile-an-hour mushrooms, and then I have my 100-mile-an-hour mushrooms. I have to slow to 100 miles an hour to know for sure that it's a lion's mane or a Hericium. Now, if I have to get slow down to the point where I have to get my microscope out, I usually don't eat those mushrooms, even though some of them are edible. But these are really, really good for you. And something else that is almost as good for you, it's high in ergothioneine and beta-D-glucans, the king bolete, Boletus edulis. And I was up in Alaska doing a 3-day workshop, a mushroom conference, and not a single king bolete came in. And the whole thing wrapped up on noon on a Sunday. And then the local ranger who had put on this show said, well, let's wade out to this little island in the bay. And we balanced on logs and we were each carrying 2 big mushroom baskets. We picked every king bolete on that little island. The island was maybe 3 times as big as this room, So we completely cleaned it out. And then the next day, we had to take one of the speakers down back to his place. And as we were driving on these logging, we were driving down, and I saw these logging roads off to the side. He said, well, let's check out. We checked out 3 logging roads. We were driving, my guest, I was the guest of the ranger. We filled the Ford Explorer with king boletes. This is the day after getting 4 back. So 2 nights in a row, we're up all night cleaning and processing, because in Alaska, when you get mushrooms, you really pack them away. But we had to go to Cordova next for another 3-day workshop. And the ferry terminal that we needed to take was not working. So I had a choice between flying down to Cordova from Anchorage, or I got to drive inland up to the upper part of the Copper River and spend a night at the largest national park in the country. And I happened to be put up with a PhD woman who was my children's babysitter years ago, and but on the way we stopped at that island again. So we had been on the island on Sunday, and this is Tuesday. So we wait out to the island, and it was full of mushrooms. We filled 4 baskets again, just after 2 days. So as we're driving, we called her husband, and we says, okay, you get out to the island on Thursday and Saturday. And each time it was like nobody had been there. But the real important part of this story is a year later, they're having dinner with their friends who also knew about the island, and they'd gone every other day also. They went Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. So the point is, when you find a king bolete patch, just get there early in the morning, and you can go to the same patch every day. And that works pretty well even in the Gifford Pinchot. And that applies to spring kings and these fall kings. And I've never found one over 1.5 feet in diameter in the cap, but they can get to 3 feet in diameter. And when I was a beginner, and I had The Savory Wild Mushroom was my book, and I had just bought it, and I was backpacking with my wife up above Salmon-Lassac, and we were seeing mushrooms all day. But when I saw my first king bolete, there was no doubt. I mean, I said, that's a king bolete, and I'm total beginner. So this is a really great, another great mushroom, and it's probably 10 times as healthy for you as eating an agaricus. I don't eat agaricus anymore. I don't want to waste my time. I eat shiitake and lion's mane and bear's head and king boletes. And it has a netted stem. Now, sometimes this netting is a lot more subtle than on this mushroom. When it's young, the tubes are covered with this white stuff that disappears. And when they're mature, when the spores are getting mature, it'll get even a darker olive green than that Grand Edulus in the photograph. And the center photograph, by the way, is from the East Coast, but it could have easily been here. The point is, this mushroom is in Europe. It's in everywhere you're going to go. It's a really important one to know. Really delicious, really healthy. And these are its close relatives, and they're all good. Now, the Boletus barosii, known as the white king, is differentiated from the regular king in having a very dry cap, where the regular king has a slightly sticky cap. But the regular king can be white, but its common name on the regular king is penny bun. They look very much like a dinner bun. They're that same color, basically the same proportions. And the spring kings I like even better because they're crisper. And very few people really go after them heavily, but I do. And then probably in about a month, the queen boletes are going to get started. And when it comes to eating them, I can't tell them from a king bolete. But they have a frosting on them that disappears as they get more mature. And they grow later in the season. But really delicious. They're the same netted stem. They start up white. Any of these are gourmet mushrooms. So now I had not paid much attention to Areoboletus mirabilis, the admirable bolete. It always grows on rotting hemlock. And it's a little bit soft flesh, and it's yellow. And a couple of years ago, I was doing a workshop for the Mount Adams Institute, and we had collected a whole bunch of this, and we cooked them up, and I discovered it has a lovely, mild, lemony flavor. And this is now high on my list. And this is a mushroom I ignored for 50 years, pretty much. I would eat it once in a while, but I really focused on the kings. And the one thing I never would do is eat a blue staining bolete. Some of the blue staining boletes are very poisonous. Some of them are very, very bitter. And this one is very, very delicious with exactly the same flavor as the Areoboletus mirabilis. And right now it's called Boletus smithii. And Alex Smith, he was the leading mycologist in the country at the University of Michigan. But he would come to Evergreen all the time because Paul Stamets and I had a scanning electron microscope that we could use, and he didn't have access to that kind of equipment at the university. And he said that this is called smithii because it's so changeable, just like he was. So sometimes the stem is very, very red, sometimes not red at all. Sometimes the cap is very, very red, sometimes not red at all. But usually one or the other. And so this is a blue staining bolete that you can eat. And I just started eating it 2 years ago. It took me that long to get up the nerve to eat blue staining boletes. Now this is a butter bolete, and this is a blue staining bolete. And the interesting thing about the butter boletes is when you cut them, the flesh is butter colored. And it can be like Tillamook butter, and sometimes it can be like Irish butter. But the bitter boletes, which look a lot the same, have white flesh. Now, you don't want to eat a bitter bolete. I can assure you that's true because 3 times now I've made a mistake in eating the bitter boletes. The mistake is you cook them up, you take one bite, and you're gagging for the next hour. You don't swallow it, and you're just ticked off that you wasted time hauling it out of the woods. So this is the conifer butter bolete, and I ate this for the first time 2 years ago. It's so much more delicious than a king bolete, and very distinctive. But notice it Brews is blue, but it has a slight yellow flash. Sometimes the yellow is more intense than that, and it often has a little bit of a sort of a pinkish red color in the cap that helps distinguish it from the bitter bolete. Now, would you eat that mushroom on the far left, this one that I've cut? Or are you going to throw that away because it's buggy? I'm not going to throw it away. Not on your. Those were ants that went through and ate holes in it, and they're gone anyway. And if it was fungus gnats, it was born and raised in the mushroom. You just added protein. So this is examples of the bitter boletes that you don't want to eat. Notice they also stain blue, but their flesh is much more white, and there's several different species. Now, Calloboletus marshii is named for this guy Marsh, and he was just north of San Francisco where he lived, and he was determined to make this thing, to eat it. And he's cooked it every way you can imagine. And I can assure you, he didn't have enough imagination. What you don't want to eat is one of these. The Satan's bolete, Rubroboletus eastwoodii, you'll find under the oaks. So I find it when I'm out looking for my lion's mane. The photograph in the upper right I took this summer. I had been looking for this mushroom for 50 years. I'd only seen it once. I found it again and again and again this summer in a place that I hike almost every week during mushroom season. It had never been there. And this year, it was everywhere. So that's the other thing about mushrooms, you never know. But the only one, the Rubrobolidus pulcherimus, has killed people. In general, the Eastwoodii usually smells so much like a recently used outhouse that it hasn't, but it'll poison you, but it's fairly rare that people choke it down. And then Rubrobolidus hematinus, I found one and only time. The same place where I found the pulcherimus this year, I found it last year in Gifford Pinchot. Now, turkey tails. The very best medicinal mushroom, but not a mushroom for eating, is the turkey tail. So when in 2022, my wife was diagnosed with metastasized lung cancer and given no chance to live. She's doing great right now, by the way. This was the main thing I used, but not the mushroom itself, but the mycelium that Paul Stamets makes in his host defense. And I always thought it was just a thin, kind of leathery thing. And so that mushroom in the upper right, I was sure I had something else. It wasn't a turkey tail, because look how thick it is. Now, the turkey tail on the underside, there's a lot of lookalikes from the top. There's about 10 things that look like it. So in my book, I put all the things that you're going to confuse it with right together, so you can help learn to separate those things. So, but you could make tea out of it, but if you really are taking it medicinally, you want to use the mycelium. And the reason I think that that's so important, the mycelium is microscopic, and the walls are materials go back and forth through them. They put their enzymes out, they digest their food externally, and then bring it in. But that means that a virus can get in and out really easy, that a nematode, they have no defenses at all, except chemical. And this is why, in certain cases, and this is the most important one, you go for the mycelium. And this reishi, everyone goes crazy over reishi. I don't. They're very beautiful. They're an annual. You can make a tea from it, but whether it'll do you any good or not, I haven't found good evidence. And so I just want to kind of deflate the reishi enthusiasm. But something to get really excited about are truffles. I had never had a ripe truffle except one French black that Paul Stamets gave me years ago. And OMS had a foray here 10 or so years ago. And so 8 of us went out. It cost $1,200. We got 1 pound of truffles, and the truffle dogs were the secret to that yield, because if you go and dig a truffle, you're almost always going to get one that's not ripe. And one that's not ripe is boring. It has no taste. You've got to have a ripe truffle. But these ripe truffles are incredibly good. So each of us got 2 ounces of these Oregon white truffles. Now these grow under Douglas fir, under coastal Douglas fir. So you'll find them from Northern California all the way up to southern British Columbia, but like in the Willamette Valley, the Puget Sound Trough, along the coast, And so I took 1 ounce of my 2 truffles and put it in one jar and the other ounce in a second jar. And then you stick whole uncooked eggs. You stick various cheeses. I actually had more in there when I filled I filled it completely full of food. And then you don't put rice in. You want something that is high in oil content. And the best cheese, by the way, was Asiago cheese that really took up the flavor. And the worst cheese was Brie, which didn't take up much flavor at all. But the eggs were amazing. You just crack the egg. Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to keep going. I put that jar in the refrigerator for 2 days. And after 2 days, I took all that food out, wrapped the truffles in a fresh towel, and refilled the jar. And then I did that 3 times. And so from my 2 ounces of truffles, I got 6 gallons of butter, eggs, whole avocados were really great in there too. But truffle butter, we were eating, truffle toast with truffle butter for 2 years afterwards. So you think it's costs a lot of money for truffles, but man, the bang for the buck. Now, the other thing you need to know, though, it can be a love-hate relationship. The active ingredient is the male sex pheromone. And so some men in particular don't like these truffles. And like my boys, they won't touch them. I love them, and so does my wife. And that dog on the orange and white dog, that had been in training for just a month. And the other one is a retired police dog. And go truffling, but go with your dog. And the important thing I learned also, don't spend your money going to a dog truffle training course. You're going to spend thousands of dollars. Go to a search and rescue course where they train your dog, and then you train him to get interested in the truffles. And so it's a very good way to do it. And I had a reporter from the National Science Foundation come to my place because this woman Heather and her dog Rye came. She's studying the oak-associated truffles for a PhD at Eugene. So a whole bunch of the neighbors and Noah Siegel showed up, and we spent the day truffling. We found 13 species. Nothing good to eat, by the way. So truffles aren't necessarily going to be good, but the dog is just amazing. And then puffballs. You can eat any puffball as long as it's pure white inside and soft like a marshmallow. That one down there on the right was originally pure white. That's just turns dark as it gets older, but it was never soft like a marshmallow. It was hard. And that's called an earth ball instead of a puffball. And sometimes they're sold as truffles. But they have, the thing to know about truffles, no smell, no purchase. It's all in the aroma. And so one of my students forgot about the rule of soft like a marshmallow, and she cooked a couple of sclerodermas and ate one bite. And it took her about 2 minutes to get to the bathroom, but things were an awful mess but it made her so sick so fast that it had no lasting effect. But the sclerodermas can kill dogs and kill pigs, so they're very dangerous. But you get a big one that's still all white inside, slice it about the thickness of a piece of bread, and then you can either dip it in a tempura batter and have tempura, or I dip it in my French toast batter and have them for breakfast with maple syrup. Or right now I'm using some wild plum sauce. And Calvacia fragilis is one of the tastiest of the puffballs. The Calbovista thing is not quite as tasty. And the fragilis is interesting. The spore mass turns purple. Most of them, they turn kind of olive green. So it's a very pretty mushroom. Spiraceus radicata, the cauliflower mushroom, can reach the size of a bushel basket. And you treat it like egg noodles, and you can make lasagna with it. And it's a very prized mushroom. Another one of my 100-mile-an-hour mushrooms. Always cut it off at the base. Don't extract the whole stem, and keep track, because they'll often grow on the same old growth tree year after year after year. Most people know a lot better than to try and identify Romerias, but they're very beautiful. I don't know better, but and so I do identify them, but they're gorgeous. But unless they're big and meaty, like that Romeria ruby permanens, which has a hazelnut flavor, uh, they're pretty boring to eat. And what you want to do, by the way, is say, oh, look at that beautiful coral mushroom. And then you hope nobody asks any more questions about it. Oh, come on. Right. Now, this is probably the most important mushroom to know. And 20 years ago, we weren't very concerned about this one in the Northwest. It was in California, but it's moving north, mostly along the freeway corridor from California. And this is deadly poisonous. And so you really want to learn how to identify Amanita phalloides. When it's real young, it looks a lot like a puffball because it's completely enclosed. But if you cut it from top to bottom through the middle, it won't be uniform pure white. You'll see the developing gills and stem, and you'll know not to eat it. But I have seen Amanita muscaria group mushrooms in the farmer's market for sale as puffballs. And again, you just cut them in half and you're going to know and not make that mistake. It has a cup-like vulva. It has a ring on the stem, and it has a white spore print. The cap can be white, greenish yellow, or bronze. It's fairly variable in color. There are a number of species. We have 2 species on the West Coast. Amanita ocreata is white, and it is in Vancouver and in Portland, and it's mostly associated with hazelnuts in this area. So it's important to know these mushrooms in the Amanita phalloides group. 90% of all mushroom deaths worldwide are this one species. And that's because it's a European species, but when we transplanted plants from Europe to North America, all over the British colonies, we were bringing trees from Europe, and so now this thing is all over the world because it came over with the roots of the tree. It's mycorrhizal. And so this is one of the ones I use in how to use my key. This is the first example because it's the most important one to know. Okay, come on. There we go. Now there's a lot of Amanitas. If they don't have a ring on the stem, and they have a cup-like vulva, they're edible. But would I eat it? Uh-oh. I remember having this guy from down the Eugene area calling me and said, I just noticed that my mushroom had a ring on the stem, and he'd eaten Amanita phalloides. And another time I got a call from a guy down in East Bay by San Francisco. He didn't bother to get his mushroom ID book out until after dinner. So the other recommendation I have is use your book first and eat later. These are your classical toadstool. Across the top, I'll give you another quiz. How many different species do you think are in that top row? What? You think one? You're right. It's one species. And is it Amanita muscaria, variety muscaria? Well, no, we don't have it. Is it Amanita muscaria variety flavivulvata, which looks identical to this, but it hasn't been found in the Northwest yet? I'm calling it Amanita chrysoblema because it matches the DNA of something found where Amanita chrysoblema was named in the upper Midwest, but there's still an argument on what to call it. So one thing I'm doing a lot of now is the top row is Amanita muscaria group. The bottom row is now Amanita pantherina gemata group, because there's a whole bunch of species. Now, all of these have mucimol and ibotenic acid. They're all Alice in Wonderland mushrooms. Lepistanuta, the bluet, and it's got some similar lookalikes. It's a little tricky. It's not a good beginner's mushroom. And eating it undercooked is really good for bloody vomiting and bloody diarrhea. So it's not one of my favorite edibles, but well cooked, it's okay. Although, why? I'm not so sure. Some people like to eat anything. The ones in the bottom all smell like licorice or anise. And if the mushroom you find smells like licorice or anise, you can use it in cooking, but you only want to use like one because it's a very powerful flavoring. If it doesn't, the ones on the top, don't eat them. They're quite probably all of them contain muscarine. Perspiration, salivation, lacrimation, your pupils shrink till you think you've gone blind, and then there's the vomiting and diarrhea for a few days. But you do need to know this one, matsutake, the western matsutake, Trichoderma murrellianum. Why do I have a plant in the photograph? That Allotropa virgatum up there, the candy cane plant. It parasitizes matsutake mycelium exclusively. You find the virgatum in the summertime when you're hiking, keep track of where it was, come back about now, and for the next month, and clear through November along the coast, you pick the Trichoderma murrellianum white matsutake. Now, they used to be very valuable, like that one, the littlest one on the far left there, where the veil is still fully intact, looks enough like a penis that it's worth, it used to be worth $100 a piece in Japan. But a very strange thing has happened in Japan. The younger folks have lost interest in sex. Now, this is a hard thing for me to comprehend, but this mushroom is no longer all that valuable. But it's another love it or hate it. David Aurora says it tastes like Dirty Jim socks with cinnamon red hots. And sometimes if I cook it just right, it's very delicious, but I find it tricky. And it's hard to see. You'll often just see a little lump. It's called a mushroom. And then you don't dig down. You grab it on the top and you rotate it around and then lift it out, because you don't want to destroy the plant, the mycelium, and it's called a shiro. And so by picking gently, you can preserve your patch over a long period of time. These are similar. Some of these, the one on the left there's two different species. One of them tastes a lot like matsutake, and the other tastes a lot like rancid flour. And the one on the right tastes like rancid flour. But when you see that, start looking for matsutake. See either one of these. Then there's the russulas. About 20 years ago, I swept a NAMA photo contest, and one of my prizes was the russulas of North Africa. And the book weighed about 10 pounds. So if you find that you're out mushroom hunting with me and say, oh, there's a russula, that's usually all I'm going to say, because there's more than 2 or 3 different species out there, maybe 500 or 600. And the interesting thing, here's another quiz for you. Got to have a quiz. Of these mushrooms, which one is Russula aerogenea? Aerogenea meaning in Latin that it's green. What? Yeah, that's the one that the DNA came back. And that's how easy it is to get your russulas right. The color is totally unreliable. But this one, there's about 6 species. These are the shrimp russulas. They're really delicious. And so I want to tell you something that very few people know. If you scratch the stem with your thumbnail, it'll quickly turn yellow. And over the next couple of minutes, it'll turn brown. And these 5 species all, when you're in the woods, they won't smell at all. They won't start smelling and tasting like shrimp till you're home and cooking them. So how do you know it's a shrimp russula? If you see that yellow and then brown staining, it's a shrimp. And they're really good. Whether they're good for you or not, I don't know. They're not one of my medicinal ones. Now, then everyone's after the lobster mushroom. It's very, very popular. But when it gets reddish instead of orange, it's a dye mushroom. You no longer want to eat it. And it parasitizes various members of the Russula brevipies group. And here's the secret. The Russula brevipies taste just like the lobster. And everyone's after the lobster and ignoring the brevipies. There's a whole bunch of species. So if you happen to like lobster mushrooms, you can just go for these other members of the group, especially the ones under oak. The ones that have that depression in the center that look like the lower right, but under oak, are the most delicious. They're much more delicious than a typical lobster, but same kind of properties. And then there was the mushrooms that give milk. They're interesting. Some people eat them. The oyster mushrooms. Now, the little things that Pinellus, that now Synctinoidus longiquidus, is not very large and a little bit slimy. It's not a good oyster mushroom. But Pleurotus PNW07, which we used to call Pleurotus austriatus, and that's the real austriatus is on the right. We have both. And these are really good and highly nutritional. And the yellow oyster is 4 times as medicinal as the regular oysters. Now, Pleurotus porogens, angel wings, in that lower center one, is not a true oyster. It has an interesting flavor. It grows only on rotting old hemlocks. And in Japan, about 10 years ago now, this thing fruited in massive abundance. And the Japanese love it, and they ate great quantities of it. And the elderly people who were on kidney dialysis, it ate holes in their brain and they died. But people who had good functioning kidneys got away with eating it. So I treat this one with a little more respect now, and don't eat it. And Cortinarius. The other thing is really important. Say, oh, look at that beautiful Cortinarius, and then you quickly go on to the next. Oh, look at those beautiful Cortinarius, and you quickly go on to the next. We're almost at the end. Then you get to the agaricus. Sometimes they're not bad in size. And Coprinus comatus, the shaggy mane, tastes a lot like oysters. And you don't want to eat Coprinopsis atramenteria. You can drink as much beer as you want up until the minute you eat that mushroom, and nothing will happen after you eat it. But if after you eat it, for as much as a week, you better not have another sip of beer or wine, or else. Now, there's another reason you might want to eat it. It's highly carcinogenic. And so I don't eat the inky caps, but the shaggy manes. And on the agaricus, if they smell lovely and still smell lovely when you cook them, you can eat them. I don't bother because they're not very medicinal, and I'm old enough now that, you know, I'm dealing with probable prostate cancer and definitely skin cancer, so I'm looking for medicinal mushrooms. But the vomit comet smells sort of like wet asphalt, and it has phenols. So to put all this together, I've done this book, and I mentioned it. It really is an extremely unique book, and I think it's very important, especially to get started and to understand how things are organized. And I didn't put things in there in alphabetical order. Things that look alike are together. Thank you. Anyway, counting the lookalikes, this little book covers 1,500 species, and it has the distribution information. So many of the species that I included are on the East Coast or in the Midwest or down in California, Europe, North Africa, and all that information is there. And so I'm really proud of it, but what I don't have is detailed descriptions of each mushroom. But I'm co-author of a program called MycoMatch. It's free. You download it on your computer, and the descriptions there are way more detailed than any field guide. And so it's an extremely powerful tool. It contains over 6,000 photographs contributed by 180 of us fanatic photographers. And we've been working on this, I think we're about 25 years into the project. We update it every 2 years. So even if you don't buy my book and are using my book, you need to know about MycoMatch because it's free. It's hard to use. My book makes it easy to use, but you can be using another book and just double check and get more pictures. And the important thing is I've got 3 pages of a key. So does the mushroom have gills? Does it look like a club? Does it look like jelly? And for each, if your answer is yes to one of those, it tells you what page to go to and what lead on that page. And then I've also arranged things that look alike together. So the 2 mushrooms on the top, Gyromatra venenata and Gyromatra splendida. Now that's wrong in both cases, but that's a mute point. You can't tell them apart. One, I didn't do DNA, so the first one could have been splendida and the second one could have been venenata, but they have gyrometrin in it. And in communities where, and parts of the country where there's a lot of this, people like to eat it. And where people like to eat it, there's a very high incidence of Lou Gehrig's disease. And do not eat it. Now, Gyromatra montana now has a new name. It's no longer called Gyromatra. It doesn't have gyrometrin. But it's distinguished. The stem is almost the same diameter as the cap, where the other, you see how much smaller the stem diameter, how different the stem diameter is from the cap. That one's edible. And so that's how it's laid out. And the other thing I want to mention in closing is I have a website. I have a volunteer who created it for me. She's incredible. She's a retired leading designer of websites, and she loves mushrooms. Mushrooms at Cascadia.com. So it's not only about the book and where you can buy it, but I've got programs in there, podcasts in there, and I have an alphabetized list that I update regularly of all my iNaturalist posts. And right now, I've got about 200 species that I've found since the book came out. And so you can see pictures. And the other advantage is if it's something that's already in the book, if it's on iNaturalist, it's not on paper, it's on your computer screen. You can blow it up and get a good look at it. So I really wanted people to know about that. Now you can use that. You don't need to have my book. You can use this website. It's got my reviews of all my favorite mushroom books, and I love them all. There's a whole bunch of good mushrooms. It's not that I wrote the only good one. There's a whole bunch of good ones. I have 200 at the moment. I'm a little bit fanatic, I guess. But I also have my recipes for helping people with cancer and skin cancer, fast healing of broken bones, fast healing of surgery. It's all the same. I'm in disbelief. This is something I didn't believe in medicinal mushrooms back in 2022, but I'm having people who I've introduced call me almost every week telling me stories that just make I can't believe it. A woman, an oncologist who, I mean, she was a nurse assistant at an oncology center. She had ovarian cancer, metastasized, was in remission, but then at Christmas time had vaginal bleeding, and they studied, and there was a big lump on her liver. Her liver blood chemistry was horrible. My dentist introduced me to her, and we talked, and as we talked, she ordered what I recommended. This was on January 6th. She ordered all this stuff. She went in for her MRI on January 21st. No lump on her liver. 2 days later, I get an email from her saying, blood chemistry all normal. Now, she's got other problems, but she didn't have to have surgery, and I've got 3 more stories just like that, just from the last few months. So I'm very excited about that. Yes. No, I don't mind. Yeah. Um, what I do rather than buying supplement capsules is I buy the supplement powder, and it's like 1/6 as expensive. And so you just, depending on how, the only thing I change depends on how serious the cancer is. Anywhere from 1/8 of a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon twice a day. It's that range. Like if you just have you've got a lump on your breast and they're going to have to do a lumpectomy. If you do just turkey tail mycelium alone, I've had 3 women do it. First, this isn't something I discovered. This woman who I knew had been an Evergreen student when Paul was a student. And when she had her breast cancer diagnosis, she tried to buy some turkey tail, but she couldn't find any for sale. So she went and bought Paul's Host Defense turkey tail mycelium. 20 days after she started, just 2 capsules a day, the surgeon did the surgery. He had already marked the lump. It was gone. He couldn't find it. There was no lymph node involvement. And I've passed this story on to I was in my post office and my UPS driver came in saying his wife had been diagnosed that morning with breast cancer. And then I told my replacement at Evergreen, and in all three cases, within 20 days, the lump was gone, the lymph nodes were not involved, they were in remission. Yeah. No, you wouldn't try and collect the mycelium. What you would do, and this is the other important part, and this comes from my own research, is one wild turkey tail from another might be 100 times as potent as the other one, and they look the same. And the inspiration for this story is the discovery of penicillin. In early World War II, they were having housewives from all over the US and Canada send in their samples of moldy bread, moldy fruit, and one particular rotten melon from the Midwest produced massive quantities of penicillin. So that has grown up in culture, and all the penicillin we get comes from reproducing that powerful melon. And the reason I support Paul's work is not because he was my student, but because he studies hundreds of strains of turkey tail to find a potent one. He employs about 6 PhD scientists, and then he grows that. So, and it's the same thing. Penicillin, that's what you make blue cheese out of. Penicillin notatum. It's exactly the same species as but that produces very little penicillin. Okay, here's where I want to emphasize. If you don't have a known disease that you're trying to fight, okay, go harvest or buy lion's mane in the store and just eat it and oyster mushrooms and shiitake and other and king boletes at least 3 days a week. And don't waste your time and money on supplements. But if you're fighting an urgent cancer, if you've just broken a bone and you want it healed in 2 weeks, then you go get the supplement. And that's an important distinction. You'll spend a fortune buying supplements. So in that sense, I'm undercutting Paul, and because I don't want you to waste your money if you don't need it. Now, I do take small amounts of turkey tail, the supplement, and I've got turkey tail all over my orchard, and I just don't ever bother to harvest it. It's just a lot easier. And when you think of how long it takes to grow your culture, to keep your culture sterile, and then process it, and it isn't worth it. And so I'm happy to spend some money on a 200-gram jar that I can make 1,000 capsules with. So, and I do that. I mean, so I take some lion's mane capsules, but I still eat all the lion's mane I can find and all the hericium I can find. And that should be your main thing. It's just going out and eating mushrooms and hunting for them. And then you'll fall in love with the woods, and you'll want to preserve the woods. I have my cathedrals. Alice has been to my church. Everyone's welcome in my church. So it's just marvelous to be out there in Gifford Pinchot. Yeah. 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 there were spruce on the island, and the king boletes are associated, but there, the Boletus edulis variety, grand edulis, is not associated with spruce. It's associated with the alders and pines. So depending on what variety of Boletus edulis, you don't have to have spruce. Is there another question? Yes. And there's two things. If you want an autographed book, I go into, they're sold by a bookstore, not by me, and I don't get any money for it, but I go to the bookstore and autograph the book so that when you buy from that one bookstore, you're going to get an autographed book. But if you're not going to buy from a bookstore, please don't go to Amazon. Go to bookshop.org. It's the same price. And if you use, I have a bookshop.org account. If you click on my bookshop.org account to buy it online, I'll get a 10% rebate. And my favorite bookstore will get a 10% rebate. And all the rest of the profit is divided among all bookstores in the country. In other words, it's a nonprofit organization just to preserve bookstores. And I want to preserve bookstores just like I want to preserve forests. So, but yes, and you can actually order, you can, if you needed one of Noah's books or something, I've got those on my website too, on my bookshop.org account. So, but I got a good pile of books here for those of you who want one. So, yes. Lion's mane and cordyceps, but there may be something else, and I still have to do a little more. It's quite likely that taking psilocybin once a month can actually reverse Alzheimer's. It hasn't been done in people yet. It's been done in cell cultures, and it's been done in mouse models of human aging. And I saw the videos of these old mice looking near dead. And 6 months later, these vigorous mice with a full head of hair, the regular color, not gray and stringy. It's the same mouse. So I'm still playing with that idea. And it's illegal right now. But and I don't have my Schedule 1 drug license anymore, which I had for 20 years. But I'm going to be looking into that in the next couple of weeks. This paper came out the end of July this year. It's brand new. And but it's very exciting. The only mushroom I would not put in my mouth and chew on are those red-pored boletes. Every other mushroom you can handle, you can taste. Now, you don't want to rub them all over your body, mind you, because you can absorb chemicals through your skin, but you can pick any mushroom you want. A few people will have a skin sensitivity, but it's very rare. And take them home. You can bite into any mushroom, just spit it out. And quite honestly, don't do this. You could swallow a bite of an Amanita phalloides and probably not get sick. But I'm not going to do it, and I don't recommend it. I mean, they're not a plant. Now, there are plants that just handling and then not washing your hands. And there's amphibians, you stick it in your mouth and pull it out right away, and you're dead in a few minutes. Mushrooms are way less scary, way less. And I am the toxicology expert of North America and Europe. So I have had a little experience with that. So, okay.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much to Dr. Michael Beug. This was such a treat to get an introduction to some of your favorite mushroom species, and I hope, like me, I hope you all are inspired to get out this fall and find some of these mystical and magical finds in the forest. Once again, reminder that we do have guided mushroom forays happening in the next few weeks out in the Gifford Pinchot, and we'd love to see you there. And lots of mushroom expertise in the room. Lots of great folks to connect with. We hope we'll see you at a future Views and Brews across in Portland next month, and then back here in Vancouver at Lewitt Brewing in November and December. Thank you all so much for joining us, and let's have one more round of applause for Michael Beug. Woohoo!